Hey, good. Do we have everyone?
They're coming in.
All right.
Should have everyone.
Beautiful. Good morning. My name is Jane Overbeck, and I am going to be leading this session, Why Change is So Hard, with Melissa Sherman. And Melissa and I are the co-chairs of the events team for the MLC. So with that, let's get started. So I really like this slide. And, to put it simply, change is scary and it's challenging. And I like it because it says, who wants to change? Everyone raises their hand. And I think when we say who wants to change and we think about, someone gave the example, and I really like it, of who wants to change, who wants to look great in their bathing suit for the summertime, and everyone can raise their hand because we all want to. And then who wants to change when you think about having to change to be healthier and you think I'm going to give up pizza and beer and wine and ice cream, you're a little less enthusiastic. And then when we get to the final one, who wants to lead the change, everyone's out of the picture. And per the Harvard Business Review, individuals don't step up to lead change because of three risks: interpersonal, their image, and the risk of being blamed. How many of you can relate to this picture? I want this to be really interactive. So
well, there is in the chat. Adam's like, yes.
So, raise your hand, put yourself off mute and feel free to talk. So why is change so hard? How many of you have ever been really excited about a new iPhone or an Android, but getting a new phone and you can't wait for the new release? And then you get the phone, and what happens? For some reason, they've decided to change where some things are. It doesn't work the way you want it to. You go to start a Teams meeting or a call and it's not working. And pretty soon you're just so frustrated. You want to take the phone and just throw it. And the big thing is like, I can just remember saying, like, I just want to go back to my old phone because I want to know where everything works. And you're so frustrated. And the interesting part is you are so frustrated and you don't want to look stupid. You want to be able to understand how to use it. So all those things that are over on the left-hand side of the page, the mistrust, the lack of confidence, the emotional response of being angry, is definitely what I was having when I got my new phone. Fear of failure, I can't figure it out. So you have all those things going on. But the interesting part is you get the new phone and a week later, you know how to use it. But the gut instinct is frustration a lot of times. So here's some typical reactions to change.
I'll just pipe in there for a second, Jane. Would love to hear the attendees, what one resonates with them, or if there's other reactions that you've noticed as you're implementing new solutions and going through problem solving and doing what you guys do on a day-to-day basis out there. And I kind of would flip it even a little bit of, even though these are typical reactions to change, or resistance to change, a lot of these, specifically that I don't have time. I hear that frequently as we're trying to do problem solving. Well, I don't have time to problem solve this. Well, then we're always going to be in that vicious cycle of it's not working the way I want it to, but yet I don't want to take the time to fix it. Oh, silence. That's a good one, Adam. We've already tried that. We have plenty of work. We've always done it this way. I don't have time. The whole that's never going to work. This makes things harder.
Hey, Melissa and Jane, this is Holly. I wanted to add one of my favorites is, yeah, we're ready to change as long as I don't have to, or as long as it's not me.
That it doesn't affect me. We can
Right,
change
doesn't
as long as it
affect
doesn't
me.
affect me.
Yeah.
Yes, or they can tell us who needs to change.
Yeah.
So I went to a conference and there was a neuroscientist who talked, and he talked about why people resist change. And he said, some of it's really innate. Okay. So the basal ganglia part of your brain, it likes repetitive tasks. So how many of you have ever driven to work and you get there and you're like, wow, how did I even get here already? You're just on autopilot. So sometimes it's like you're pulling in the driveway and it's like, wow, okay, that was quick. Because your brain's someplace else, but your brain knows how to do it because it likes the repetitive stuff. And he took us all the way back to being a caveman. We liked what was repetitive and we knew what kept us alive. So if we were hearing a lot of noise in the bushes, we knew to get out of there. So that's one of the reasons we like repetitive. We like to know what to expect. And change is exhausting. Have you ever gone to a class or something and by the time the day is over, you just feel exhausted? And you really do feel exhausted because your prefrontal cortex uses the most energy in the brain center. So if you've been learning something new and you've been going at it for hours, you really are exhausted because your brain's been working so hard. And he also talks about exclusion is painful. And he said your body processes physical pain and exclusion in the same way. So think about being a kid on the playground and no one wants to play with you. You feel awful and it feels physical. And when people are told you're going to change, we want you to change this and that, and they've never been included in it and it's being done to them, it's painful. And when he talked about limbo as a no-go, he said that's the single worst state of the brain is uncertainty. And I think about, fight or flee. Your brain doesn't know what to do and it's just hanging out there. And it leads right into the next one. We have an anxious amygdala. So your amygdala is the part of the brain that gets triggered and then you feel anxious and you feel fear or depression or fatigue or anger. So when your brain doesn't know what to do, these things really come. And then the last one, and this one really resonated with me, that he said loss is hard. And he said, the emotional response we have to change, loss is stronger than the emotional response of gain. And he gave an example of this, and it really resonated with me of, and I'm going to give a couple examples. I mean, like when we think about loss is hard, the first day you put your kid on the bus to go to kindergarten, you're like sad. You know he's going to go to school. You know you want him to grow up, but it's still sad. And then when you send him off to college, you have the exact same, I dropped my kid off at college and then I cried half the way home. I wanted him to go to college. I'm happy he's going to college, but it was still a loss. And how my home life was going to be and what we were doing was a big change. when I was at this conference, the guy talked about loss is hard and it's hard for people to have. And how many of us have ever walked into a plant or an office and said, we're going to implement this change and it's going to be great, and here's why? Has anyone besides me ever done that? Holly, Melissa?
Holly dropped. She has a work issue that came up. And
Caitlin raised her hand.
go, Caitlin. Yeah, absolutely. You know, I've had, well, just the thought of a granddaughter now going off to school next year, even though I'm not in the house, it's change. It's thinking a little bit differently.
Yeah. What they were saying is you have to really lead change with compassion and with empathy. And he used this example, and he said, if someone told you that their dog was dying, you wouldn't say, oh, that's great, because now you don't have to buy food. Now you're not going to have to take him for a walk. Now you're not going to have to pay vet bills. No one would say that. And yet sometimes when we're asking people to change and they're giving you all of these reasons why they're upset about the change, we're like, oh, this is going to be good. And here, let me tell you why. And you're telling them once again, instead of saying, I know change is hard. I know it's difficult to get through this. And so we really need to remember to lead with empathy. And this is the change curve. The shock, the denial, the frustration, the depression, then the experiment where they start to engage, the decision, and then the integration. How many of you can relate to this curve with the changes that you've implemented?
Had some thumbs up coming through. And I would even say, at any given time throughout a change, we have somebody in just about well, is there 7 categories? I can't count them now. There's going to be
There's
somebody
7.
in each of those categories, right? So it's not like everybody's in shock and everybody's in depression or everybody's in decision all at the same time. So you have to be conscious, and as you're implementing and going through and explaining the why this change is happening, of, okay, I know this individual's in shock. I might need to change my message slightly to bring them along on that curve, right? So well, how do I say that? There's not a one size fits all message to have everybody move along a change curve. So you just have to be cognizant of that as you're going through it.
One of the things when we were putting daily management into our plants, and I remember one of the plant managers saying to me, oh, people are like really depressed about this. And I said, Matt, we talked about this. We were going to go through this. This is the valley of despair. And now people are going to start getting used to it, and they're going to have the data they actually need to do their job better. It's going to get better. We just have to keep pushing through this. The one thing about this chart is they show each of the 7 areas kind of in the same time frame, the way it's divided. In people's experience, what phase do you think we get? You have seen people get stuck on the most?
I would say denial.
Anyone else?
So yeah, we got a denial, a couple frustrations. Most people are looking at that denial and frustration area that are commenting in the chat.
All right. And with that, I am going to hand it over to Miss Melissa to do some talking, so you guys just don't have to listen to me.
Well, no, and now it's activity time. So take your hands and clasp them together. And now take note of, is it the right thumb over the left over the right, right? You just naturally went and clasped your hands together because we don't think about it. It's, that natural habit. Now separate your hands and consciously do it the other way and feel the difference. But if you continually do it, I don't want to say the wrong way, the opposite way of what you would out of habit, the new habit would come in. The new habit would come in, and the next thing you know, in my case, my default is right thumb over left. If I continue to consciously do left over right, that becomes my new habit, and I don't even realize it until down the road someday when somebody says, hey, do this experiment. And I'm like, oh, I used to do X, Y. So that's one of the things with change, right? Is just thinking of how things are done today and how they're done differently. Going back to Jane's example of driving to work or driving home. We're on autopilot. We know the route. We go it all the time. It's really great to change that route up on a daily basis. No, I shouldn't say on a frequency, so that you don't get stuck in that autopilot mode. Because I can just say, for example, I drove from Jackson home last night. Granted, I was on Bluetooth, but I was talking on the phone the whole time, which made the drive go quick. But I typically get stuck in traffic in Grand Rapids. And I got home last night, I'm like, I don't think I had to slow down. And if I did, I don't even remember. So there's a pro and a con to that. Hey, sweet, I got home and I don't remember. But the con is like, I evidently wasn't in the moment paying attention, that I could have gotten an accident. I could have had something happen, right? So again, back to that change, being cognizant of what you're doing. It's great to change up routes so that you're in the front of what you're thinking about. All right, Jane, you can hit the next one. So what is a paradigm? The paradigm is how we as individuals see and interpret things. And I love this Masaki, I always pronounce it wrong, quote, the starting point for improvement is to recognize the need, right? So when you guys are looking at this, is this ballerina turning left or is she turning right? When you first look.
Right.
I've got a right, and they might come in through the chat. Maybe I should say clockwise or counterclockwise. I went clockwise the first time. Now, if you look away and look back, she may be twirling the opposite way. And so why do we see things differently, right? It could be our upbringing. It could be our focus. It may be our biases. It may be what we want to see. When I walked in, maybe I wanted to see her twirling left versus right. So you have to make those cognitive decisions and come in open-minded so you're not making the presumptions, thanks, Jane, of what you are expecting a result to be. So in this one, right, it talks about how if you are focusing on the left or the right foot, makes a difference on which way the ballerina is twirling.
Mm.
So the other thing I like to throw in here, although it's not 100% change management, but it is, as we think about our role in the lean world, right? We do a lot of data and visual management. And so you could take this concept and think about, oh, geez, if I took this data and I have a pie chart and a bar chart and a scatter plot, that same data could be interpreted 3 different ways, even though it had the same, we'll call it outcome. Along with, you could take the same data and have it in a bar chart that has 2 different scales, which could misconstrue your presentation, and therefore that paradigm of what is being visualized and how it's perceived. Any questions from a paradigm or any input people want? I've done this so many times, Jennifer, that I don't know which way she goes naturally for me anymore. um, but yes, there are some of those. There's a lot of other ones you can throw out there where you've got like the tree and was it a tree with a lion in it? Do you see the lion first or the tree first? And there's the vase slash faces and all right, Jane, you may go forward.
Hey, there we go. I was being stubborn. Sorry about that.
Okay, that's how it came up. So as we think to resistance to change, I really, again, I'm one for pictures and quotes. So, Albert Einstein was great at saying we cannot hope to solve the most difficult problems with the same thinking that created them. And right there in itself is change, right? To think differently about how we're going to attack and look at our problem solvings. What I really like here is that, the people's beliefs, values, and attitudes are formed and bonded over time through the influence from family, friends, society, and life experiences. So by the time you're an adult, you can hold very definite views on just about everything from the sense of no one is going to change my mind. And this is really nice, right? So if you think about your values, this person, you have your own set of values, which they consider of great importance, which leads to those beliefs, the idea of that is accepted as true without any facts, and then your attitude, a way of thinking or feeling with regarding to someone or something. So as you guys work in your fields, do you run up against anybody with the challenge of attitude, right? Well, it's my way and I'm going to do it this way. No matter what you say is not going to change that. Well, that's a huge indicator of resistance to change, right? Their beliefs and their values. So this is just, there's no one change model out there, just like there's no one change curve. I happened to pick Kubler-Ross earlier. But there's, the ADKAR model. So I don't know if anybody is change certified on the call, but you can get ADKAR or ProC, which has that awareness, the need of change. These are the steps, right? You build that desire to support the change. You now have knowledge of how the change is going to happen, that ability to demonstrate skills and behaviors, and then that reinforcement to make sure the change is sticking. Then you've also got very similar, a little bit different in wording, you've got the 8 steps that Cotter has, right? So you're building a coalition, you're forming strategies, you're enlisting volunteers, right? You want those change advocates to really help you move the change forward. You got the enablers, the generates, the sustain, institute and create. And then the last one is actually something we use at Consumers Energy in our change management group, where again, it's around those belief actions and behaviors that we've seen back on the previous slide, but we go in and we define the change. And that defining of the change is really digging in. What is the change going to be? We build a stakeholder list. We look at where they might be in that change curve. Then we design what are we going to do to help people come along in the change. And that's not always, I'm going to say, just communication, right? There's more to change than communication. Then we go through and implement. We make sure we do a reinforce. So we're going back and doing that PDCA of the change, and then we're evaluating it and continuing through that cycle. I'm curious if any others on the call use something similar or have their own setup process that they follow in the work that they do. Kevin, I really like what you say, outside influences or opinions. can escalate your thinking and how we view change too. I like to call that group think. We got some ad car in here. Right, I know we're moving quickly, but we really would love to have open discussion, right? It's a coffee chat.
Sure, take yourselves off mute.
Yeah, I sound awful, so I don't need to talk anymore. So one of the last slides that we have really too is some of those top strategies to overcome that resistance. And many of these are relevant whether it's change or not, right? So let's listen first and talk second. People really want to be heard. They want to be given a chance to voice their opinions, help alleviate frustration and how they feel over the situation. A coworker of mine the other day commented on, how do I not butt in and talk over somebody? So they actually will sit and listen with their hand over their mouth, and I don't want to because I know it will mute me. So it keeps them from blurting in and talking and allowing them to listen first, hear what the person's saying, and then talk. And I went, that's actually a really good strategy. I need to start that one. Another thing of a strategy is, communicate the reasons for the change. So important of the why, the what, and the how, right? If we don't know why something is happening, we can perceive what the why is and start making those assumptions, right? Or you hear from somebody else. So really make sure that as a change is coming through, you explain why you guys are doing it, what the change is, and how it's going to affect that overall new way of doing things. The next one that's extremely important is get excited. The change agent, you have change advocates, whoever is helping you along with this, get that excitement in there, right? And the more the merrier, the more the happy. Is that how it goes? Right. Generate commitment by engaging champions, because we know if we have the one or two people that's on that change group, I guess I'll call it that, with us, if you have the one bad apple, they're the one that people are going to listen to, right? So you want to really have the excitement in there. It's also, the what's in it for me, or make it about those employees. Change is only possible if employees are involved. So look through the lens of the user. And I would say most times ourselves as change agents are going to be part of that change. So look through what's in it for you and what's in it for them.
Melissa, did someone raise their hand
I didn't see it.
Okay, I thought I saw something fly by. Okay.
Super fast, sorry.
Go for it.
No, it's great. We want interaction.
Don't be super fast.
Well, I was whatever. So the first part of this, properly scoping your projects, is probably the biggest piece, right? So that it focuses your conversation, it focuses where you want to go, it focuses the change, and that you're not all over the board, and then you can get excited, right? It's much easier when things are properly scoped. And so listen first.
I would agree 100%, Adam.
All that would fall right into place once your project is scoped properly.
Without a bunch of creep. Scope creep, I should say. Sorry.
I was just going to say, and that is a great point, because even when you're doing home improvement projects and someone's like, oh, we could do this, it's like, can't we just focus on what we're doing here? I mean, it just becomes overwhelming. So you're right. Making sure that you have that defined really helps.
And I would add to that, in addition, it would be smaller scopes, right? Like, you can have an overall arching goal of this massive thing that you want to take on, but take it on in smaller bite sizes and scope each bite size. And that, I found that being very effective in moving away from those massive or those large scale projects where the whole thing is scoped in one document and you're trying to keep it all figured out, right? So separating that, breaking those down a little bit. Anyway.
I love that idea because I'm actually working on a transformational change right now at work, and the thought of the sponsor and the change group is that they want to build this 2 to 5 year roadmap, which is cool. Don't get me wrong. But as an employee or as an individual, they want to know what's the next month and the next 6 months, right? So I love that you brought that up because I'm going to challenge them as they build these roadmaps up that says, okay, here's our roadmap, but this is the 2-track that's going to get us to the next step in the road. So thanks for bringing that up, Adam.
No problem.
The other thing here, right, we have delegate change, so fight resistance with culture, train team members on how they are natural leaders first, looking at showing that data is extremely important as we go through change of why the change is happening. And then to what you just mentioned, right, implement in stages. Change can't just happen overnight, I remember Jane used this example today, or if in a discussion we had earlier, it's like, okay, I need to change. I want to lose weight, but that doesn't mean when I wake up tomorrow morning, I'm going to be 10 pounds lighter, right? Okay, only ate one meal today, right? So it's just really being realistic in what the implementation and stages are and how you're going to go through the process steps to implement the change and then make it sustainable. And I love this slide, right? You can't improve what you don't know. I would agree, Kevin. Many times the why is not explained or it's not clear.
So I want to throw it out to the group. What have you done that worked best in achieving the change? You can take yourselves off mute and just talk to us.
Yeah, and I'll add to it, right, just to think a little bit further differently. What did you do to make sure it was sustainable? I know I've been involved in a lot of things where we had success kicking it off, and then like a month down the road, it was back to the way we did things before, right? So it wasn't sustainable.
I've personally been most successful in change with inclusivity. So if you know, even as a leader, if you know what the outcome has to be, presenting as a conversation with the team or going through the steps of, brainstorming, just because I know what the outcome needs to be doesn't mean I know the best way to get there. Because if I'm not the one doing it every day, I can't come in and say, Melissa, you're going to start doing it like this. And you're like, this is dumb. You just made my job 17 times harder. If you would have just, how many times have you been told you're going to do something and say, you didn't even ask me? Like, I totally could have said to you, look, if we just moved the mouse on the left side, it made it so much easier, right? So
Yeah.
so having that conversation to say, you're the one that does it every day. Like, this is what we have to achieve. So let's together talk about how we can get there. Understanding that no matter what comes of this conversation, we have to get to this end result, right? So I don't particularly care how we get there, but we have to get there without walking around the block, right? It needs to be the quickest, fastest, easiest outcome. And then doing that together. And even if I think I know what that solution is, giving them the empowerment and, inclusivity that it's really like their idea, right? That, well, I said if we moved the mouse to the left, it fixed it. And then they're more natural to buy into it and encourage the others to do it that way. And it becomes sustainable because finally you were asked, right? Like, what would make your job easier? When it can be done, like when it can be like that. And sometimes it's just understanding that we have to do it this way because there's a liability or something that's at risk. And so, while I'm sorry that it makes this harder, we have to cover our liability, or, only when it's something so severe, right? Otherwise, trying to present the issue and in a formulative, right, like intentional way to get to that resolution together.
I love that way. I love that idea.
So
Oops, go ahead,
Caitlin
Jane.
wrote visual management, making data and success hugely visible. And I really like that, Caitlin, because when people can see that you're starting to move in a direction, and you can actually measure the success, it just gets so many more people on board and starting to believe in the process.
I think I would add to that. Many times when I've been, we'll say, involved in change, they only look at those transformational changes from a work perspective or a problem-solving perspective, not the small incremental changes, which in the end have just as much effect on the individual or individuals as a transformational. Transformational just means you're hitting more of the company than maybe just a department or a group. I will bring it up frequently in the event of problem solving what I do at consumers, because I'm like, hey, this is going to impact X, Y, and Z. We really need to think about how is that impacting them, and making, to your point, Jennifer, making sure they're on board, they have a stake in the table, or at a seat at the table, so they have a stake in the game, so that they can voice what the outcome is going to affect them, along with making sure that we are looking up, down, over, left, right stream of any change and how it affects those outer areas.
Anyone else? Any comments, feedback?
I guess along those lines, my question would be to the group is, do you focus on just those big transformational changes, or do you focus on all change that affects the employees?
I think all changes. And one of the things that I was thinking about when we were talking about doing it in little steps, when we do Kaizen events on the plant floor, we will ask people to try storm some changes. And when we're going to try it and see if it works. And if we fail, we'll fail fast. So giving them the idea that we're going to make a change and it's okay if it fails is really liberating to people.
Absolutely. Adam, I see your hands up.
Yeah, I would say it's it's more rewarding to on the smaller scale, right?
Yeah.
Because you can go in, you can make a change. It'll probably stick more than likely, and much easier to track, and make sure it lasts a long term. Where you start getting to organizational changes, boy, it can get really challenging, and you find yourself bogged down with a project for a year or more, and you're like, oh my God, is this thing ever going to end? Is it ever going to stick? Is it ever going to go? So those smaller ones are so much more rewarding, because you're in, you're out, boom, you're on to the next thing, which is way better, right? And you've impacted people's jobs, and you've gotten, and a really cool part is the relationships you build. Those will help you when you go to do the larger scale projects, because I know now I can go to Susie. Susie works in finance, and part of my bigger project is in finance. Boom, I can go right to her, and she can lead me to the next person, or maybe she has the answers or whatever. So that's kind of the best thing about the smaller ones, in my viewpoint.
I love that, building the relationships. Go ahead, Jane. Sorry.
No, I completely agree with you. And to your point, I just found when I was working with the plants, if we had one success and you had the people at the plant talking about what went well, it was amazing how many other people were like, okay, well, then they were much more interested in trying something. And I did a project at Stanford Hospital, and we took just one team. It was the ortho team, and we worked with them and we videotaped them and we tried to find ways to make some changes to improve the process. And we we did it there, and as soon as we had the numbers and we started showing the graphs, like someone else said about the visual management, I think it was Caitlin, then we had the other teams going, you know, why did ortho get to go first? And when are you going to look at the plastics? And when are you going to do this? So then it was like more of a competition where it was so hard to get the first team to even work with us. And then we had people who really wanted to. So yeah, what you just said is just so key with building the momentum.
I think it's
Oh,
important too to keep in mind and be sensitive to busy cycles for different departments or different levels of the business. So, like administratively, you might not be in a busy time of the year, but for your action folks, right? Like, I don't mean any like disrespect from a higher level to a lower level or whatever, but the people who are um actually doing some of those tasks, it can be very busy for them, but not busy for administrative. Like if you just think of like how cycles run, right? Like we did the sales, and so sales isn't busy right now because now it's being manufactured, or whatever you could think of it. I was in hospitality for years and years, and it's like, what's busy time for me is not necessarily what's busy time for the people that I'm asking to change. And so timing that out properly so that you're matching their available time, which might be your busiest time, but if you need it to be available to the folks who are actually doing that change for you.
Great point. All right. Any other comments, feedback, input?
you mentioned failure earlier,
Uh-huh.
and I would suggest, and I don't know, I mean, I don't know how you guys see it, but how I see it is failure can be your best friend. And what's cool about it is if you don't get the greatest direction from leadership or what have you, or it's vague and what have you, and you go forth and you do whatever, and it turns out it was kind of the wrong direction. Maybe you got part of it, but you didn't get all of it, right? So you can say you're looking at it as a failure, but really what you've done is you've given yourself clearer direction, which is huge. And once you know the direction, you can do anything at that point. It won't fail next time because you know where you're going and how to get to that end result. Uh, I've just had this issue. This is why it's fresh in my brain because I just had this happen to me. So,
Do you want to give us your example?
I could. I work for the state of Michigan, and so we're working on a project software for software life cycle. So it's managing the software life cycle of all software within the state of Michigan, which is a massive undertaking. Direction initially from the scope document that we had was a little vague and didn't provide the clearest direction. And even as we got into the project and well into implementation, direction was very, I don't know how to put it, like just, it wasn't clear. It just wasn't straightforward and saying, do this type thing. It was very wide open type thing. Anyway, we went forward and we put something together, and come to find out, leadership says no, resources, we're not going to add additional resources, but that wasn't clearly stated, right? We hit that roadblock, we came forward, and we came back with a different proposal. It sufficed, it supported the sponsor's needs or the leadership's needs, but there's still a gap there. And I think the team, it also gave the team a little more ammo, once we did a little more due diligence and what have you, to come back and push against leadership and say, no, as we look at capacity, as we look at our resources, we don't have enough, and that our original proposal is actually the right proposal. How you implement it is up to you, but here's our suggestion type thing. So it really did help, but we failed in there. There was failure in there, and we had to come back to it. So, yeah.
What do they say? Fail fast, learn fast.
You hope so.
Yeah, we're doing Mark Graven's book for book club, and it's The Mistakes That Make Us. And he was interviewing all these people on his podcast and then wrote the book. And that's what we're going to be talking about in book club. And when I'm reading it, that's basically what he's saying is some of the people who are the most successful, they learned from their mistakes. And so, when you say that, it's, and when we talk about change, it's hard, and realizing you're going to have failures along the way is crucial. And it's how you react to those that make or break the team.
Yeah, it sucks. You spend a weekend thinking about something you shouldn't have, right? You go home, you took that home with you, you sat on that all weekend, and now that's the worst.
Hey, I'd like to add, good morning, everybody. I've seen a lot of change in the 33 years that I've been with my company. And one of the key things that Adam said was about involvement. Too many times change comes from like a level of engineering, and then the people on the floor just say they don't know what they're talking about. So that's really important to get finance involved, engineering, materials, ops managers, and so forth. And then Jennifer, what you said too about empowering. It's so important to empower people because that will make them embrace that change if possible. And I don't think we do that enough. But I think the final stage is the celebration, right? So we will have failures, which is good. And like you were saying, it's important to fail because then we learn. But after that, after we have success, that celebration is so important to be able to move to the next change if we have to have that change again. Because we celebrated, we've acknowledged that something did work, right?
Yes. I use the example and just kind of when you said about celebrating, I had a friend who needed to lose weight because of some health issues, and they lose the weight. And then when you talk to them and you say, you look great, and they're like, well, I don't have any clothes, nothing fits. And it's like, okay, let's celebrate we lost the weight and then go on to the next one. and I think sometimes we're already on to the next problem and we forget to celebrate. And that was really a good point.
I would just add to that I fully agree with celebration, but it's to be cognizant of what that celebration needs to be and look like. So not everybody wants to have a free lunch or a pizza party. Some might just want a compliment or a thank you for the work you've done. So it's still being open-minded in that celebration that brings the people still along on that journey to keep them as part of that change for the future. It depends on the group you're working with, but yeah.
For those of you who can't see all the chats, someone wrote a drunk fest might not be a bad idea, right? Or might be a bad idea.
Might be a bad idea.
Might be.
Well, we could fail fast and find out if that one works and change up the celebration for the next one.
Well, was this helpful?
We got a thumbs up from Caitlin. She's got to do some problem solving, figure out her mic.
Yes, that way she can communicate with us next time.
And fix her ADM so it's not backwards. You're welcome.
Anyone else have feedback? Anything else we want to discuss? All right, you guys, thank you so much for your time and participation, and have a lovely Friday.
And a great weekend.
Thank you. You too.